The world watched in disbelief, eyes glued to television screens and mobile devices, as a story of unprecedented scale began to unfold. From bustling city squares in Europe to quiet living rooms in Asia, people everywhere paused their daily routines, transfixed by the gravity of the moment. The air was thick with anxiety, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for the next headline, the next update, the next sign of hope or disaster. In the heart of New York, the American economy teetered on the edge of chaos. Wall Street, a symbol of global financial power, was suddenly gripped by uncertainty. Traders shouted across the floor, phones rang off the hook, and the usual rhythm of commerce was replaced by a frantic scramble to make sense of the unfolding crisis. The world's financial epicenter was no longer a place of confidence, but of confusion and fear. Overnight, $2 trillion vanished from the markets, evaporating in a matter of hours. The numbers on the screens told a story of panic. Red arrows pointing down, fortunes lost in the blink of an eye. Investors, both big and small, watched helplessly as their wealth was swept away by forces beyond their control. The shockwaves rippled across continents, shaking the foundations of economies far beyond America's borders. A shadow fell over Wall Street, both literal and metaphorical. The once bright optimism of the trading floor was replaced by somber faces and whispered conversations. The city that never sleeps was now restless for a different reason: fear of what tomorrow might bring. The sense of security that had defined American finance for generations was suddenly, and perhaps permanently, shaken. The spark that ignited this firestorm, the abrupt cancellation of a massive Boeing deal, a contract that had been hailed as a triumph of American industry just days before. The news hit like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through boardrooms and factory floors alike. For Boeing, the consequences were immediate. Production lines halted, workers sent home, and a sense of disbelief settling over the company's storied legacy. But the cancellation was more than a business setback. It revealed a deeper rift between the United States and its closest allies. Behind closed doors, diplomats exchanged tense words, their faces betraying the strain of fractured relationships. The unity that had once defined the Western alliance was now in question, as old friends found themselves on opposite sides of a widening divide. President Trump's bold trade policies, designed to redefine America's global role and put America first, had sent shockwaves through the international community. What was intended as a show of strength became a source of friction as allies struggled to adapt to a new, unpredictable era of American leadership. The world watched as the rules of engagement were rewritten in real time. Instead of drawing partners closer, these policies pushed allies, like Canada and Europe, away. Long-standing agreements were called into question, and the trust that had been built over decades began to erode. Leaders from Ottawa to Brussels gathered in urgent meetings, searching for a path forward in a world where America's friendship could no longer be taken for granted. As news of the Boeing debacle broke, markets trembled and uncertainty spread like wildfire. Financial networks broadcast live updates, their anchors struggling to keep pace with the rapidly changing situation. Around the globe, investors and ordinary citizens alike wondered what this meant for their savings, their jobs, and their futures. Boeing, once a symbol of American ingenuity and technological prowess, now found itself at the center of a geopolitical storm. The company's fate became a barometer for the nation's standing in the world, its struggles reflecting deeper questions about America's role in the global order. The storm clouds gathered not just over Boeing's headquarters, but over the entire American industrial landscape. The world watched as a titan of industry was buffeted by forces it could not control. Trade wars, diplomatic rifts, and the unpredictable winds of global politics. The canceled deal was more than a financial loss. It was a blow to America's industrial pride and global influence. Factories stood silent, the hum of machinery replaced by an uneasy quiet. For many, it felt like the end of an era, a moment when the world's faith in American leadership was truly put to the test. With economic stability hanging in the balance, investors and policymakers alike scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were called, contingency plans drafted, and the search for solutions began in earnest. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper anxiety lingered. Could the damage be undone, or was this the beginning of a new, more uncertain chapter in world history? As the globe spun and headlines flashed, the world wondered what future awaited an America at odds with its allies. Would this crisis mark a turning point or simply another chapter in the ongoing story of global power and politics? Only time would tell, but for now, the world could do little but watch, wait, and hope for a resolution. In global politics, alliances are both fragile and essential. They are the invisible threads that bind nations together, shaping the course of history and influencing the lives of millions. Yet, these bonds are constantly tested by shifting interests, changing leadership, and the unpredictable tides of world events. The strength of an alliance can mean the difference between peace and conflict, prosperity and uncertainty. When President Trump entered office, his hardline stance on trade and defense upended the established geopolitical landscape. He challenged long-standing norms, questioning the value of traditional partnerships and demanding that allies shoulder more of the burden. This approach sent ripples through diplomatic circles as leaders around the world tried to decipher the new rules of engagement. The imposition of tariffs and the renegotiation of key agreements sent shockwaves through the international community. Markets reacted with volatility, and uncertainty spread as the foundations of post-war alliances were called into question. For decades, these alliances had provided stability and a sense of shared purpose, but now, their very existence seemed to hang in the balance. Canada and Europe, once among the United States' most steadfast allies, suddenly found themselves at odds with Trump's vision for the future. The close cooperation that had defined transatlantic relations for generations was strained, as leaders in Ottawa and Brussels struggled to adapt to a new era of unpredictability and shifting priorities. The introduction of tariffs and escalating trade tensions signaled a much larger shift in international relations. What had once been a relatively predictable system of mutual benefit was now marked by suspicion and competition. Trade agreements, once celebrated as symbols of unity, became battlegrounds for national interests. Canada's digital services tax and Europe's firm stance on trade further complicated matters, leading to a series of diplomatic standoffs. Negotiations grew tense, and the spirit of compromise that had long defined these relationships was replaced by a sense of urgency and, at times, confrontation. Behind closed doors, diplomats worked tirelessly to prevent a complete breakdown in communication. The traditional bonds holding these nations together were visibly fraying. Meetings that once ended in warm handshakes now concluded with uncertainty and unresolved disputes. The sense of unity that had been carefully built over decades was now threatened by mistrust and diverging interests. The future of these alliances was shrouded in uncertainty. Would old friends find common ground once more, or would new rivalries emerge from the ashes of cooperation? The world watched, aware that the outcome would shape not just the fate of nations, but the very fabric of the international order. As leaders grappled with a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape, the eyes of the world remained fixed on their every move. The decisions made in these pivotal moments would echo for generations, determining whether alliances would endure or be lost to the shifting sands of history. At the heart of the turmoil was the unraveling of a deal that had once promised to reshape the future of the global aerospace industry. The stakes were enormous, with billions of dollars on the line and the livelihoods of thousands hanging in the balance. For months, anticipation had built around the agreement, which was expected to secure jobs, boost innovation, and strengthen international ties. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to show, cracks that would soon widen into a chasm. The deal centered on Boeing, the American aerospace giant, whose reputation and future prospects were closely tied to the outcome. Rows of gleaming jets sat idle, their fate uncertain as negotiations dragged on. The company, once a symbol of American ingenuity and industrial might, now found itself at the center of a storm it could not control. Once poised to inject billions into the U.S. economy, the agreement collapsed amid growing rifts with allies. The financial markets reacted swiftly, with investors and analysts scrambling to assess the fallout. In boardrooms across the country, executives questioned what had gone wrong and how such a promising opportunity could slip away so quickly. The Boeing debacle became a symbol of eroding trust between the U.S. and its partners. Once strong alliances now seemed fragile, as mutual suspicion and competing interests took center stage. The world watched, as negotiations that had once been marked by optimism devolved into finger-pointing and blame. Negotiations faltered as tensions and conflicting priorities mounted. Each side accused the other of failing to honor commitments, and the spirit of cooperation that had fueled early talks was replaced by frustration and disappointment. Behind closed doors, diplomats and executives struggled to find common ground, but the gap proved too wide to bridge. Canada and Europe, seeking stability and predictability, ultimately turned away from the table. Their decision sent shockwaves through the industry, leaving Boeing and the U.S. economy to face the fallout alone. The loss was not just financial, it was a blow to confidence, a setback for transatlantic cooperation, and a warning to others about the risks of fractured alliances. The cancellation reverberated across industries, exposing the fragility of international agreements in an increasingly unpredictable world. Factories slowed production, workers faced layoffs, and entire communities braced for economic uncertainty. The ripple effects were felt far beyond the aerospace sector, touching everything from supply chains to local economies. In the end, the failed deal served as a stark reminder of the need for diplomacy, trust, and adaptability in a world of shifting alliances. As nations and corporations navigate an ever-changing global landscape, the lessons of this collapse echo loudly. Success depends not just on ambition, but on the ability to build and sustain relationships, even in the face of adversity. The Boeing deal's cancellation unleashed a financial tsunami. Investors panicked, stock markets plunged, and economic forecasts darkened. The $2 trillion fallout underscored the interconnectedness of the modern economy. The aviation industry, already struggling, faced an even more uncertain future. Airlines, suppliers, and workers braced for job losses and production cuts. Confidence in the U.S. economy, once a global pillar, was shaken. Investors and nations questioned America's ability to lead in international trade. The repercussions threatened long-term global economic growth. The crisis highlighted the urgent need for renewed cooperation and diplomacy. Amid the turmoil, Canada and Europe stood firm. Their cancellation of the Boeing deal was a calculated response to rising tensions, with the U.S. leaders emphasized the need for stability and fairness in trade. Canada's digital services tax and Europe's commitment to a rules-based order clashed with U.S. unilateralism. Their decision reflected a fundamental divide in global trade relations. The world saw the importance of alliances and the challenges of maintaining unity in a fragmented era. The fallout hit Boeing and the aviation industry hard. Production lines slowed, thousands of jobs were at risk, and uncertainty loomed. Boeing's struggle mirrored the broader challenges facing American manufacturing. Suppliers and related industries felt the pinch as orders vanished. Communities reliant on aviation faced destabilization. Boeing now had to adapt to a world where alliances and trade rules were rapidly changing. As the crisis deepened, all eyes turned to the White House. President Trump responded swiftly, doubling down on trade policies to reassert America's position. Yet the path forward was unclear. The administration balanced defiance with attempts at dialogue. Fears of a broader trade war grew. America's future role in the global economy was in question. Allies and adversaries watched closely, gauging the impact of U.S. actions. The White House's response would shape both the immediate crisis and America's global trajectory. The crisis marked a turning point in international relations. America's traditional allies distanced themselves, and trust was in short supply. The Boeing deal's collapse revealed a deeper rift threatening to reshape the geopolitical landscape. Canada and Europe faced a choice: align with a changing U.S. or forge new paths. New alliances and partnerships began to emerge. The world entered a period of uncertainty, where old rules no longer applied. In this new era, diplomacy and cooperation were more vital than ever. The Boeing debacle was a stark reminder of the complexities of international relations. As the dust settled, the world reflected on a fractured global landscape. The challenge of maintaining alliances in an era of shifting priorities was clear. For everyday Americans, the impact was real: economic instability and job losses. Yet, there was also opportunity for renewal and growth. The story was one of transformation, trust, and the enduring need for unity. The lessons of this crisis would shape the future of international relations in an interconnected world.